Harbor City. She was born in 1908. Her name was Mildred Lizette Norman. And now why? Okay. Um, and you can see this early picture. She was the oldest of three. And next to her is her brother Alfred and her baby sister Helene. And Alfred was 3 years younger. Helene was 7 years younger. So here she was probably about 12. And
Muted.
they grew up on a chicken farm on the outskirts of Egg Harbor City, and their great grandfather was one of the first settlers of what was then Germania, and he became the first mayor. It
Mhm.
was people immigrated from
Okay.
Germany to get away from oppression and lack of creativity. A lot of them were artistic and wanted to, and they were free thinkers. And in her household, besides her mom and dad, she had her three aunts, and then her uncle lived down the block. So basically, she grew up, around six adults and two siblings, and there was nine of them, a very close knit family. And she didn't have a formal religion. They were not affiliated with any church or any specific school of thought, but they were very strong, morally compassed. And she got a lot of her early thoughts and her, sort of foundation for who she became from the lively discussions and from her family. And she actually took the golden rule and turned it into one of her early famous sayings: if you want to have friends, you have to be friendly. And she was really popular in school, and people report that she was actually really precocious, that she learned to read at 4, was reciting poetry at 3. By the time she got to high school, this is her yearbook picture, she was the head of the debate team. She was smart, she was outgoing, everybody liked her, and she graduated as valedictorian of her class. However, back then, because they didn't have money, they were very happy, but they really didn't have money. Helene told a story that I love, that when they were little, because they kind of had four mothers, their mother and the three aunts, they didn't have to do a lot of chores. But they had a chicken farm and there were pigeons around, and she and her siblings would catch the baby pigeons and pluck them, and then they would be sold to the fancy restaurants in Atlantic City because it was a delicacy. And for every bird that they provided plucked, they got 8 cents. And they would use that as their spending money. So I always got a kick out of that story, although I'm a little appalled by the thought of eating squab. But I just think it just shows that they really had a good time playing in the woods and playing on the farm. Um, After she graduated, she easily got a job as a secretary at Liberty Cut Glass, which was a big employer back then. She was in heaven. She made $20 a week and she went nuts. She basically bought herself matching outfits, hats and shoes, furniture. She bought her mom furniture, and she even bought a car. And she was quite the party girl. She would go to Atlantic City and she'd dance, and they would, just have a great time. It was sort of the beginning of the Depression, but it didn't seem to affect her because she made this money. Even when Liberty Glass Company burned down, she then got a job at Renault Winery, which, by the way, she got her sister Helene a job at. So Helene jokes that, Helene was there for 50 years. She jokes that she got her job through her sister and her husband through her brother because she married one of Alfred's best friends. But Peace Pilgrim happily worked at Renault Winery, made the money, and lived a very, very sort of party girl, roaring 20s life. And she met and fell in love with Stan Ryder. So in 1933, and her family did not like him at all. He was a so-called businessman, but in the, sort of beginning of Depression, he couldn't keep a job. They didn't think he was right for her just from a, standpoint of his upbringing, but she eloped with him. He was another fun-loving sort of party guy. And after a few years, You know, and you have to remember back then, it was like when Gone with the Wind came out. Disney just came out with Mickey Mouse. It was, you know, Life magazine got published for the first time, and she loved all the hip new things, and so did he. Um, but then after a few years, and there's not a lot of sharing about this, she does have some writing in her journals, but after a few years, she was not that happy and she couldn't figure out why. And she had all the money she could want. She had all the friends and they had good times, but she was really conflicted because it was also a time of the Grapes of Wrath kind of scenes and the food lines and people, you know, all over the world really suffering. So here she was living this wonderful life. Yet there was a part of her, she would see these images in the brand new Life magazine. That's mostly where, you know, they published all these stark, you know, we have 24/7 media, so none of this is as shocking to us, although just looking at them, it is pretty shocking. But imagine back then where you got these kind of images, full size, glossy black and whites, once a month when the magazine came out. And she started to become really conflicted and disconsolate within, and she wasn't really sure why. You know, she was married and they still went out. And then one night, she always loved the woods. She was a tomboy, she grew up in the woods. And then one night, she actually had what she called a great spiritual experience. It was 1938. She'd been married for 5 years. And she said, the turning point came when, in desperation and out of a very deep seeking for a meaningful way of life, I walked all night through the woods. I came to a moonlit glade and prayed. I felt a complete willingness to give my life, to dedicate my life to service. Please use me, I prayed to God, and a great peace suddenly came over me. And she had written in her journal after that, it was a point of no return. After that, I could never go back to completely a self-centered living. So that was what she called the beginning of her great 15-year transition. She was really in tune with the fact that she couldn't keep living her life the way it was, but she had no idea how she should live it to find her purpose. So during that 15-year transition, they had already moved to Philadelphia, she and Stan, and she began, while she was still working at Renault, she began volunteering for peace organizations, doing everything she could, getting petitions signed, spreading literature, manning tables. She actually was quite good at getting publicity for things. She was already starting to work with different newspapers and outreach. And in addition to that, she started volunteering in hospitals and in detention centers and in homes where she would work with the elderly, people with special needs, people who were so poor they really had dramatic, you know, they had trouble living. And that fulfilled her to a great extent. So she decided to actually quit her job. And the other thing that she started doing was hiking. She had always loved the woods. She found solace in the woods. Now she joined a formal group called the Endurance Hikers. And when they say endurance, she used to do easily 30 miles on a weekend, or sometimes 40 miles. When other people dropped out, she was still going. And she loved it. She absolutely loved it. So she wound up, because she had quit her job, and she also went through this cleansing period. It wasn't all, you know, all at once, but while she was hiking and volunteering and doing all these things, she also gave away all her possessions. She gave away everything she didn't absolutely need to live because she wanted to live in simplicity. She left herself 2 dresses and she lived on $10 a week. And even when the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom offered her a job, they wanted to hire her as their lobbyist in Washington, D.C. She still only took $10 a week and still refused to use it for anything other than helping others. So she decided to take the job as a lobbyist, and she moved to Washington, D.C. And not a lot of people know this about her. She just, charged up those congressional steps every day. Walking in, she started with the New Jersey representative, laid out all the petitions for peace and disarmament, and, nuclear weapons were starting then. And they all, one by one, looked at her and said, "You're smart. You know exactly what you're talking about, but I'm sorry, there's too much else going on. We can't, there's no way economically or socially we could disengage or do anything with our Defense Department or disengage from war." And she was so overwhelmed. I mean, she didn't write she was disgusted. I can imagine how disgusted she must have been. But while that wasn't the big turning point, it really, really disappointed her. And in the meantime, her husband, Stanley, who still couldn't get a job, she's still married at this time, her husband, Stanley, still couldn't get a job. He wanted to enlist. And she had become so adamantly opposed to war. She said, "Don't, Stanley, please go to jail." And he said, "I won't go to jail for not enlisting. You only go to jail if you don't show up when you're drafted." And she said, "Please, please, please don't go." So he didn't. But then he got drafted. And she said, "I will not go with you as long as you're doing anything with the military. I will not act as your wife." And he went to boot camp, told that to his commanding officer, who then said to him, "That's grounds for divorce." And he filed for divorce. She got a brown envelope with all the divorce papers, and then really, from my standpoint now, was opened up to living the rest of her life. So she took more to hiking and walking around a lot. She was so disgusted with her lobbying job in Washington and still not knowing what to do that she actually took off for a couple of years and hitchhiked across the country. And she did that, watching people, talking to people with no specific, route in mind and no specific literature or anything else. She just wanted to see what people thought about the war and what was going on in the world. And it turns out McCarthyism was raging then. Actors were getting blackballed. People were afraid to speak up. They were apathetic or silent or pro-war. And Mildred at that point still knew she hadn't found her purpose, but she couldn't go back to living the kind of life that she used to live. So what did she decide to do? Walk the Appalachian Trail. She went on a big, long hike in 1952, and she was actually the first woman to complete the hike. And there's some funny stories around that I'll share if we have time. But basically, she walked the trail as a meditation. And she picked berries, and she had, dried milk for lunch and oatmeal for breakfast. She only carried a blanket and a few other things. While she was walking the trail, she had come to, she sort of had a habit of sitting down every afternoon, and she wound up on a mountaintop in New Hampshire, and she got into such a meditative state that she saw a vision of herself. The mountains in front of her disappeared, and she saw a patchwork of the country, almost a miniature map of the United States. And she saw a tiny little version of herself dressed all in blue with white words that said, "Peace, Pilgrim," on the front. And in that moment, she writes that she knew exactly how she was going to spend the rest of her life. She realized that those 15 years that she had spent from 1938 to 1953 were all a preparation of giving everything away, relinquishing her money, of, hiking the Appalachian Trail and living very simply, of working for the League and really, honing what she felt about the war and peace and everything else that was going on in the world, volunteering with underprivileged people. She realized that all of that was a preparation for being able to achieve inner peace. And part of what she went through, she later described in a radio broadcast that one of the founders of Friends of Peace Pilgrim transcribed, and is what you read today when you read the steps towards inner peace. So, I'll talk about that in a little while. It's her purifications and things like that. So she hitchhiked to California. She found someone to make herself the outfit that she had seen in her vision on the mountain in New Hampshire. And here she is on January 1st, 1953. She took off in front of the Rose Bowl parade before the football game in California, carrying 3 petitions. Now there you could see in that picture, she's carrying a little bag. She later gave that up and didn't carry anything. But in that bag, she did have an extra sweater, and she had her petitions that she was going to have people sign as she walked across the country like she saw in her vision. One was to stop the Korean War, which had started. The second one was to create a United States Peace Department and create name a Secretary of Peace. And the third one was for our country and our military to lay down their armaments and not support any nuclear studies or anything else. And she stood in front, just imagine this, the Rose Bowl parade with the bands and the floats and everything behind her. She walks out without permission or anything, right in front of them. And people, as she's walking, are stopping her, and some are signing her petitions and really engaging with what she's trying to do. Some people offered her money, and she said, "I don't need money. I will be taken care of." And her famous quote is, "I will walk until given shelter, fast until given food, and remain a wanderer until mankind has learned the way of peace." And she never did accept money. In the 28 years that she walked. And at one point, she saw this burly policeman racing towards her. And we know all this from things she wrote in her journal afterwards. She saw this burly policeman racing towards her. And I don't know, I'm imagining her with a smile thinking, uh-oh, is my game up here? And he just tapped her on the shoulder, and he leaned in and he whispered, "We need more of you," and wished her luck. So that was the beginning of her pilgrimage. And she wound up immediately in the newspapers, on TV, on radio stations. She was already very good at media from what she had done with the Women's League and other parts of her life. And she was able to really work the media to get a lot of coverage. And we have thousands of newspaper clips on our website from throughout her pilgrimage. But the other thing that happened when she walked, the next day after she left, she was walking down through San Diego, and one of the teachers in a local school, she's walking down the main street, a teacher came running out of the school and said, Miss Peace, no one even knew what to call her. And she asked her to come talk to her class. She said, "We've read about you in the newspaper. Would you come talk to my class?" And Peace Pilgrim said, "I've never spoken to a group before. She's okay one-on-one." She was nervous. She kind of backed off and was a little reluctant. And the woman said, "Oh, please, you don't even have to talk. The kids have so many questions. All you have to do is answer." Well, she was such a hit and had such an amazing impact on that class that speaking became a major part of her pilgrimage for the rest of, the rest of those decades. She would use the media, and she would also line up talks, or people would reach out to her to schedule talks, or like that teacher did, they would just see her and, ask her to speak. So that became a really, really good part of it. And I have a little clip of a video I want to show you, because not only does it let you hear her voice, it kind of, I think we have we also have dozens and dozens of video clips on our website, but every time I hear this one, it makes me laugh. So I'm sure you will enjoy it as well.
I turned to silver when I started out. And when I told my friends I was now going to change my lifestyle, they thought of a comfortable retirement home. And when I told them I was about to walk across the country, which I did the first year, they thought I had taken leave of my senses and would probably kill myself the first year. But I walk on that endless energy that comes with having done the psychological or spiritual growing up, with having found inner peace. It never runs out. And I looked around and I said, how sad. Most people only scratch the surface of their real potential. They have no idea what they're capable of.
Yeah. So how can that not make you smile? She's really just a wonder, really a wonder. So she actually walked for the next 28 years. By the end of that year, she reached the East Coast. She brought her petition with all those signatures to the UN, and then down to, she had 2 sets, no less, to the UN and then down to Washington to bring to Congress. And then in 1955, she took off on her second pilgrimage. In 1957, she did 1,000 miles throughout Canada, 100 miles in each of the provinces. And then in 1964, she actually reached her 25,000 miles. Now, by then, she did not start out with a tunic that said 25,000 miles walking for peace. Her tunics evolved as she did. But by then, she did have her 25,000 mile tunic, and she reached it. And what that meant, because she was really particular, she didn't take rides. She really kept track of where she was. She counted very carefully. After that, by then, she actually had such a following that she knew her schedule for, throughout the upcoming pilgrimages. And people would send her letters asking them to stop in her town or talk at their church or talk at their hall or talk at their school. So she kind of had this schedule going. And what the stopping of counting meant is, although she didn't do it very often, she could accept rides, which she started doing. And she had a lot of speeches lined up and needed to get from one place to the other. Having to walk there was no longer something that she said, well, I can't do it, because she would just do as much as she could. After that, she did her 4th pilgrimage in 1966. 69 was her 5th pilgrimage. 73 was her 6th pilgrimage. In between, she would come home to Egg Harbor City, and Helene always told the story how she would sleep outdoors, and she would sit at a table and answer letters and, spend most of the time that she was home visiting family. Although she did write them. Helene said to me that she really always kept up with sending birthday cards, no matter where she was, to her nieces and nephews, and, kept up with things. But once she was home, she didn't socialize at all. She really kept to trying to keep her peace pilgrim. By that point, she had thousands of letters a month. And she had arranged with her sister Helene to check mail. They created a post office box in Cologne, New Jersey, in the Cologne post office. Helene would go check it every day. And they would just come addressed to Peace Pilgrim, Cologne, New Jersey. And Helene would know where she was going. Peace Pilgrim would let her sister know where she was going to be the next week, and Helene would take all those and mail them to wherever Peace Pilgrim was scheduled to be. So she was going to be in Denver, Colorado. She would mail this big packet of letters to Peace Pilgrim, Denver, Colorado, and then Peace Pilgrim would go pick them up as she was walking. So, Helene did a lot of behind the scenes things, and it was wonderful. The one thing that I actually think is interesting, by the time this lower picture, by the time it was the Vietnam War, Peace Pilgrim was kind of a rock star in the peace circles. And there's this one story that I read that she wrote that really, really brought home how serious she was about finding inner peace, no matter who you were and what your perception was. She went to a college in San Francisco. They invited her to speak. And by then, she was so popular that the entire auditorium, where she used to speak to 10 people in a church, she filled an auditorium like the Rolling Stones. I don't know. She just like filled this whole auditorium and got and talked her talk and gave her message. And everybody started chanting, peace, 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 peace. And she saw how riled they were getting. So she played into it and she said, oh, do you hate the war? And oh, do you hate Nixon? And oh, do you hate this one? And they're stamping and they're chomping and they're yelling and peace, peace, peace. And then she got really quiet and she said, you're just like they are. Are you feeling angry? Are you feeling like you want to get them, change them? I mean, she just kept honing in on the truth of inner peace means being able to disagree with someone or not even necessarily like them or get along with them, but to be able to view them as human beings, not the other, which is, we're in the throes of that right now. So her message is so important for where we are in 2021. And that's the one thing that stays with me every single time I read or write about Peace Pilgrim, because she truly, from the get-go, realized that connection, that universal connection, and how we are all walking sometimes in pain and anger and hurt, yet that doesn't mean that we can't operate from a center of love. So I, really appreciated that. In all, she walked across the U.S., not completely across. She was in her 7th pilgrimage when she had her glorious transition. But after that 25,000 miles, she continued to walk another 17 years. And she went through 29 pairs of sneakers. I don't know if you can see this. I'll kind of hold it up over here. We have her. I have one of her pairs that, the rubber's hardened and everything else, but she bought them a size too big and wore them until they had holes in them. She didn't buy them. I really have to correct myself. She had patrons all over the country who would buy her new sneakers, who would have new tunics sewed, who would, do things, have her newsletter. She actually wrote her own newsletter to her then thousands of people on her mailing list. And people would mimeograph them. Another person would send them out. So she went through these 29 pair of shoes and she wrote that she averaged 1,500 miles per pair. So Bruce Nichols, one of the Friends of Peace Pilgrim board members, did the math and concluded that she walked enough to go around the globe 2 times, to circle our Earth twice, that she walked nearly 45,000 miles in the years that she was walking. So it's quite spectacular. When she was in her 7th pilgrimage, she went to a speaking engagement in Knox, Indiana. And what was most interesting, people report who were there, that she was her usual self with, I put these quotes up, talking about things, giving her speeches. She had this tendency to look everybody in the eye. She had that high-pitched voice. She had those sparkling blue eyes. She used her hands all the time. And she really brought the audience in. But there was something about that day that several of the parishioners said afterwards. She kept looking upwards. And she kept she had this energy about her. And then when she was done with her talk, normally she would say things in peace and friendship or until next time or whatever. She just said goodbye to everyone. And at the time, no one thought it was that unusual until the next day when actually she was killed in a car crash on July 8th, or July 7th. This was published the next day, 1981. And what happened after that was particularly interesting. She had by now tens of thousands of followers. Her sister was still getting her mail. So her sister knew this was happening. But for some reason, there was, the people who knew her from around the country had no idea where she was from. She wouldn't give out her name. She wouldn't give out her hometown. She wouldn't give out her background. She said her sole mission was peace, and she didn't want people distracted by her background or her history. So she has tens of thousands of people around the country who know nothing about her. And then she has a family in South Jersey, some of whom still think she's crazy. And even though Helene knew she was getting a lot of letters, no one knew the real impact. No one in her family knew the real impact she was having. But once she passed away and all those letters came into the Cologne mailbox, and all the friends and all the people whose lives she touched across the country reached out, Peace Pilgrim's family realized how significant her journey and her impact was. And right now she's buried in the Germania Cemetery, and the three little pine cones behind the big one are her three aunts. And for many, many, many years, for almost 40 years, Helene would bicycle over on a regular basis and make sure that those peace sign pine cones didn't get blown around and stayed in place. Helene, as Barbara Reynolds sometimes says, is the homemaker version of Peace Pilgrim. And she really, truly is. I've only known her, not even 10 years, but I consider her as much of a role model as I do Peace Pilgrim. She has unfortunately left us 2 weeks ago, and she is in our hearts. She's now joined the rest of her family, but she made her glorious transition at the age of 105. And for many, many, many years, she forwarded Peace Pilgrim's mail throughout the whole entire pilgrimage. Her husband, an avid historian, compiled a comprehensive scrapbook of all the letters and all the postcards and all the newspaper coverage and all the pictures that they kept in their home for many years, and recently, maybe 5 years ago, donated it to the Egg Harbor City Historical Society. So that is on display there along with one of the tunics. And most importantly, for 40 years, she has become the surrogate peace pilgrim in spreading her sister's message. So she has participated in retreats and celebrations and talks and all kinds of things to keep her sister's message alive, which honestly is her own message as well. She is a woman of peace who has lived gracefully and simply, and will truly be missed by everyone whose lives she touched as well. And then finally, the Friends of Peace Pilgrim is made up right now, is run by a 7-member volunteer board of people from around the country. Barbara, our own Barbara, is one of them. And I don't know if Jeff or Bruce or a few other people who signed up are on. So if you have, please chime in, because you know more about Peace Pilgrim than I ever could, and have given more to maintaining her legacy than people will ever know. But after Peace Pilgrim's transition, Richard Palese, one of the board members, invited people who knew her to his home in New Mexico just to have a celebration of her life and the impact she had on it. And many people came to New Mexico, but even people who didn't know each other, to do this. And the offshot of that was this group, the 5 people stayed afterwards and decided they wanted to really put something down. They went through all, and when I say all, there's a lot of news clippings and her journals and her newsletters and her writings. They went through all of it and they put together what is now the Peace Pilgrim book. Peace Pilgrim, Her Life and Work in Her Own Words. And that was the first of many things. Anne and John Rush were 2 of the people. They actually in California had a Peace Pilgrim Center for many years. And Anne Rush is the one who translated Peace Pilgrim's radio talk, that California radio talk, into what is now Steps Towards Inner Peace, that talks about personal purifications, personal relinquishments. It kind of gives you a step-by-step basis of what she did in those 15 years to achieve that state of constant inner peace and connection with something greater than herself. In addition to that, the Friends of Peace Pilgrim puts out a regular newsletter. They have 2 one-hour documentaries that are fabulous. One is a little older, and you'll see actually interviews with her ex-husband, Stan. And then the newer one has quotes from Maya Angelou and the Dalai Lama, among other people. They're both wonderful documentaries available on the website, and I encourage everybody to explore them. And we also get hundreds and hundreds through social media, through letters, just through phone calls, all kinds of ways from around the world, not just in the US. She is, her message is reaching people all over the world. The Peace Pilgrim book is now translated into 18 languages. Steps Towards Inner Peace is in 33 different languages. We get notes from people, and I think it's the most rewarding part of being involved, because you can see the impact that her words are having in today's world. So just as a quick recap, she was the first woman to complete the Appalachian Trail in one season. Believe it or not, I know we just heard that the Black Lives Matter is up for a Nobel Prize, which is very wonderful. But Peace Pilgrim was actually a Tennessee chaplain or pastor nominated her for a Nobel Peace Prize in 1981. You cannot be considered posthumously. So her name was removed once she passed on. And who knows how well known she'd be if she had actually indeed won the Nobel Peace Prize, but everything, as she would say, goes on as it is supposed to. There's a statue of her in Egg Harbor City, thanks to Barbara. Barbara was one of the main drivers behind having a Peace Pilgrim Park created in her hometown, bringing celebrations to the high school. They had no idea what a hometown hero they had. I mean, they heard about her, but Barbara really championed having something that would recognize and celebrate her. And likewise, the UN Peace University in Costa Rica had a statue. It's unfortunately since been damaged, but Barbara was one of the people who went down with Helene in 2000, I think it was, correct me if I'm wrong, for the dedication of the statue down there. The other thing she did that a lot of people don't know, she actually talked to lots of lawyers and legal groups, and she planted seeds. Some of them to this day say that she was the one who planted the seeds for legal mediation and conflict resolution that are, sort of commonplace now in the legal world, but back then it was, cutthroat and dog eat dog. And a few lawyers have given her credit for sort of weaving those ideas, for planting those seeds, and little by little they brought them to their organizations and said, hey guys, let's really take a look at this. So not that they gave her public credit for it, but they have intimated that it was their conversations with her that made a difference. And as you know, her words and spirit just continue to inspire people around the world, including me. And I have read her words, and it's the kind of thing you can just go deeper and deeper and deeper and continue to be inspired. So with that, I will stop the share. and welcome any questions, or if anybody has memories or comments. Like I said, I know a lot of you are more familiar with the South Jersey area, and many of you have known about Peace Pilgrim longer than I, so please feel free to share. Anybody?
I can tell you that some of the participants have been sharing some remembrances, but only privately to me in the chat.
Oh, okay.
So please, now's your opportunity to talk to all of us.
I would like to add to this discussion by saying that one of my neighbors here in Connecticut hosted Peace Pilgrim and wrote something about this. I would like very much to be able to get this document to where it can be appropriately filed. Where could I send a copy?
Oh, that would be wonderful. If you go on the www.peacepilgrim.org website, and on that website, there is a contact page.
Okay.
So there's several ways on that page. There's email, there's a mailing address, there's a phone number, there's a form that you could fill out and just attach it. So any number of ways.
Okay, thank you. I'll look forward to doing that sometime soon. This lady passed away, and she was very much an inspiration to all of us up here. And it's so amazingly wonderful to find out that she had hosted Peace Pilgrim.
Yes. Oh, I would love to hear more about that myself. We always look for people who actually spent time with her and knew her, because it's nice to get those recollections.
It was lovely. I will get it to you all.
Yes, and please feel free to join our mailing list. You would receive a copy of the newsletter. If you care to, for those of you on Facebook, we do have a Peace Pilgrim Facebook page, on Instagram, Twitter. On YouTube, there's a whole collection of videos, including that documentary. They're all available on the peacepilgrim.org website as well. So, you know, it's an easy way to spend an hour. I think you'd enjoy the documentary. It's well done. There's two of them, but they're both, you know, they're both a little different.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I want to invite Suzanne Day, if you haven't already shared your story, but your story is one of my favorite ones. Okay. I tell it over and over, but you're here and you can tell my favorite Peace Pilgrim story.
Well, there were two instances a few years apart in the 1960s when our little family, my husband and I, and a son and a daughter. So we lived in a little farmhouse outside of Newark, Delaware, in Maryland. And our meeting would get excited about having Peace Pilgrim come, and University of Delaware. Sometimes she'd speak to a class or a church group or something. We would hustle around and get speaking engagements for her. So she has stayed a night or two at our house, and I've driven her around. And so as she was getting ready to leave, and I just was amused in your talk, you showed that after the 25,000 miles, she wore a tunic that said 25,000 miles, and then it kept going up as the miles went up, the white letters on the back, however many miles for walking for peace, so that people coming upon her from the back would kind of know. Anyway, it was, at that time, she had just finished that 25,000 miles, and she was sort of not counting officially at the time. But as she was getting ready to leave, I made some peanut butter sandwiches and maybe an apple or something. And she said, "Oh no, I don't carry anything but a comb and a toothbrush." Right. You know, take it off into the rural roads with, you know, not even a peanut butter sandwich. So that was amusing to me. But I was, you know, so touched by her. And I said, "I just sort of want to come with you." And she said, oh no. She looked actually frightened, like I might actually. But she said, "No, I have my calling. This is what I do. You have your calling. And it made a huge difference to me that she called out the calling, which was right there in front of me, which was quite different than hers. But that was that would have been late 1964 or early 1965. Later, about maybe 1967 or 8, there was a woman from the Unitarian Church in Newark, Delaware, who was quite ill with cancer and lived a little further out into Maryland than I did. And so after quite a bit of her speaking engagements, she's back at our house. And I said, and this afternoon, I plan to take you over to so-and-so's house because she really couldn't come to any of your engagements, but she really, really wants to hear from you. Well, by this time, I guess she's a little old. Beast was a little older and tireder and a little crotchety about this unplanned. She said, well, I don't just talk to individual people. I talk to groups. And she was, and I had promised my friend I'd get her there. So anyway, we did go. And what was lovely is that the woman had read quite a bit. I think it was mostly reading. I think maybe that was the first time she had met her, but she remembered the particular piece that Peace had written called A Star in My Puddle. And you'll find it in her writings. And I'm pretty sure that she had written that and the friend remembered it and showed the place out in her driveway where the puddle was, where she could enjoy a reflection of a star, and connected it with Peace's writing. So on the way home, I mean, Peace was just thrilled that she had taken that little diversion. So I don't know which story it was that Barbara Reynolds was remembering, but it was powerful. You couldn't be with her without feeling that power.
I loved the part about her not taking the peanut butter sandwich. I feel like it's such a perfect explanation of how she totally trusted that her needs would be met. Mm-hmm. And I think it's hard for any of us to, it's a challenge to think about what it would mean to live our lives with that level of trust in God, or that our needs would be met.
Right.
So yeah, I tell your story often, Suzanne.
Well, I think it was interesting that she sort of bristled when you said you'd go with her, because she has some stories. She used to average like 25 miles a day, but if she had to get somewhere, she could walk up to 50. So, imagine that. Like, we could
be a real drag to have somebody else.
Right. But what she said was, once a 6-foot fellow athlete tried to keep up, he said, "Oh, I'm going to walk with you. I'm going to walk with you," confident he could, outwalk her. And he stayed with her for about 33 miles. And when he gave up, his feet were so blistered that he couldn't even walk anymore. And another time, a woman who they just wanted to walk with her for a few hours. Peace Pilgrim had to send her home on a bus because she just couldn't keep up with her. So I think she was wary of people walking with her at that point. So what question do you think she got asked the most when she was walking? Any guesses?
Why are you doing this? Or asking why she's, like what her mission is?
Yeah, that's what I thought. But the one question she got asked the very most was, what is your real name? Whether it was media or people on the street, because she had this Peace Pilgrim across her chest, and she'd introduce herself, and she said thousands and thousands of people over the years wanted to know her name, and then they started taking guesses, and the most interesting guess to her was that she was Amelia Earhart. Right. And the second most frequent question she got was, how old are you? because she had the gray hair. I mean, she started out at age 45 and she was already graying. So by the time she had walked for, 28 years, you saw the silvery, silver top and a little darker on the bottom. And she used to say to people, and I'm going to read it because I have it here, age is a state of mind, and I think of myself as ageless. And that's my advice. Get to be as old as you want to be, and then just stop creating your age.
I would have thought the most frequently asked question would be, are you ever afraid?
She did get that a lot. I actually, in the book I wrote, it's so funny you say that. I start my book with that because, from when she, in her childhood, she was pretty much a daredevil and pretty strong. And she did get it once in a while, but not as much as the other two. And she was never afraid. That's one thing she wrote
Yeah.
about quite frequently, that because of her connection, and she never described herself as religious. She still didn't, affiliate with any religion whatsoever. So, her word was, if she said God, it could be a higher power, it could be whatever resonates with you. But she felt so truly and fully connected that she never was afraid. And she recorded, I don't know, but she recorded 3 instances where she could have been in pretty great danger. And nothing ever came of it because she feels that she looked at the person through the eyes of love and connected with their inner spark. And had she reacted in fear, or had she reacted with anything but love, she may have been harmed. And she has I have 3 instances of that happening, and I don't recall reading more than that. But she kind of walked in peace. She walked the earth in a way that she did not feel fear. And a lot of people ask now, because I have given quite a few of the Peace Pilgrim talks, and a lot of them are in schools, and a lot of kids want to know, well, what do you think she'd do today? How do you think she would, make out with the internet and social media and all of that? And I had a discussion with Bruce Nichols about it, and he really has given very thoughtful responses to that, including the fact that she was so media savvy for her time and so able to connect and work and use with whatever was thrown at her. She lived through World War II. She lived through Depression. She lived through the Korean War. She lived through a lot of tough times, and she made her way and found her way. And he seems to feel, and I tend to agree, that she would have figured out a way to use it to help spread her message.
Mary, we have somebody who asked in the chat box how she picked her route.
Her first route, she strictly was going from California to New York, and she started in January, so she did the southern route. She did have, sort of south in the winter, north in the summer, to try to stay out of bad weather. But she got caught in snowstorms. She got caught in, desert, hail, all kinds of things. After that, her second pilgrimage, she decided she wanted to walk 100 miles in every state, including visiting the state capital. So her route was guided by that. By her third time, I am positing, I don't know for sure, she had already had enough of a following where people had written her and said, next time you go out, please come to Detroit. Next time you go out, please come, to Tennessee or wherever. And I think she kind of built her routes around that. But I'm not particularly sure about that. Other board members would, the board member, I'm not a board member, but board members may know more than I, but I am assuming that it was kind of driven by where people were asking her to go. They were, contacting her from all over, because it got to a point where she had to turn people down and say, okay, I'm booked for 1962. I'm booked for 1967.
Well, speaking of booking, I was in Ann Arbor in 1981. And at the end of meeting, when people were making announcements, someone rose and said that Peace Pilgrim had been killed in a car crash.
Oh,
Well, she was booked to come to Ann Arbor like on Wednesday night, and this was Sunday.
no
And
kidding. Wow.
so I was going to get up and announce that about we were going to have a potluck with her or something. I can't remember what it was. And so the person, I mean, I said to the person beside me, I can't, I just was totally shocked. But we decided to just go ahead and we plastered posters around town even more than we might have if that hadn't happened. And it was glorious. I mean, people who had known her from all different stages of her mission, and I don't think any knew her from back in Egg Harbor City, but um,
Hmm.
it was our. I was privileged that that was my third encounter with her.
Wow.
She was really present. It was terrific.
Hmm. I wish I could have known her. I say that all the time. I've heard that from people, how when you were in her presence, you felt like you really were being seen and heard. Hmm. Any other stories? If any of you who have these stories feel like mailing them to the Peace Pilgrim organization, we would love to have them as part of the records. I can speak on behalf of the board that it would be wonderful, as someone just said, something you have, but anybody who's just recounted some of these encounters or memories or stories, we would absolutely love to add them to our collection. There is one thing I didn't mention. Peace Pilgrim was really savvy and media-wise and everything else, and she also had in mind just preserving some of what she did. So she reached out to Swarthmore College in Pennsylvania, and they started a Peace Pilgrim collection that stands to this day. And she sent copies of everything to them. And we have sent many copies of things to them after her passing. So if anybody wanted to spend time there, you could find a lot of things. A lot of it, I have to say, is on our website at this point. It's a treasure trove. There's people who have written about her. There's people who have spoken with her sister and her brother. And when you hear their quotes, it's kind of funny because they talk about their big sister like, who would have thought? We never would have thought this when she, it's kind of funny to get that perspective.
Were her brother and sister, I know her sister was very much involved in the peace movement. Was her brother?
I don't think he got involved in the way Helene did. I don't know, Barbara, maybe you could respond to that because I'm not sure. I know they remained very close and were a loving, close family all the time, but I'm not sure of his involvement.
I think it was minimal in terms of, I know he was maybe married and even twice and I'm not even sure what state he was in because I think he left New Jersey.
Hmm.
Yeah, I don't think he was involved with that.
I didn't know Peace Pilgrim, but John and Ann Rush, who were part of the support network, they moved to Unity, New Hampshire to be with their daughter, Erica Pfister, and her husband, Albert, in their last years. And they were such advocates of Peace Pilgrim that they were still working on projects to do with her, I know, up until they couldn't anymore. And her impact on their lives was noticeable. And we have a friends meeting there, and they were attenders at our friends meeting. And it was, I know I have her book and have read it several times, and I just am very grateful to have known of her. Thank you for continuing this work.
Yeah, you. Yeah, and for anybody, I'm assuming that most of you have the book, but please go on the website, order a free book, order an extra one, give it to a friend, order a few step booklets, leave them in a, post office somewhere. Just leave them for someone to pick up at that moment when they need it the most. There's a lot of materials, and the whole mission of the board, I can sort of speak on their behalf when I say it is to spread the word, and all of these materials are meant to do that. And they're happy to mail out books, and they're happy to mail out. It's a nonprofit, all volunteer organization, but they're blessed with enough donations to keep the books printed and to keep the step booklets printed and carry on, Peace Pilgrim's legacy. So I can't see on my end how many people are on, but if anybody has any other questions.
My name is Lisa, and I have a question. So yeah, thank you so much for the presentation. I'll try to put more light on myself here so you can see me. So how would she encourage each one of us to continue that work that she inspired?
I personally would say that her main message that she honed as she walked is to foster and really develop inner peace. Because when enough of us feel inner peace, it's not about marching. It's not about, that's all pieces that can come after you have acquired that really deep sense of inner peace. Because when you are at peace, then you no longer need to give away anger or fear or anxiety or anything else. And as she spoke, and as she walked, she came to realize that the whole peace picture in our country, in the world, starts from within. So her main message when she spoke with people was to go through the steps towards inner peace, lists 4 purifications and 4 relinquishments, to go through those steps in your life until you reach that level. She even has a graphic. It's kind of a bar graphic, sort of illustrating one's growth in maturity. And she talks about, reaching the plateau of maturity where you're able to walk in the world with enough inner peace that is your gift to the rest of the world, no matter what you do. Whoever, I didn't see the name on the person who said, brought it up about the calling. We all have different callings in this world. And you don't have to walk. You don't have to, be a writer. You don't have to, whatever your calling is, your gift to the world, when you do it from a place of inner peace, you are serving the purpose of peace. So
very well said. So just a clarifying question then, is these 4 relinquishments, is that written about in this book that you're talking about? Or?
Yes, they list them, and you can go on our website. We have them listed there.
Okay.
The steps towards inner peace is a little booklet, but we also have it. You can download it as a PDF. We have it as, in
okay.
all these different languages, and it lists different steps. It's like eat right, volunteer, give of your time. They're I wouldn't call them common sense, but they're ways to really simplify your life and focus on the important things in being human. And quite honestly, I'm probably on level 2 out of 4. They're not the easiest to achieve, but if you have them as your goals, each year you get a little closer to living the way that you want to be in the world.
It does sort of sound like it happened to her all at once or something.
No, she went through this 15-year transition where she was pretty despondent at first. She went, she went from this materialistic party flapper girl into not knowing what to do with her life. So she really struggled for quite a while. And she writes about that a lot too, where, she volunteered, she tried different things, she hiked, and then it did all come together over the course of 15 years, though. It wasn't all at once. By the time she took off as Peace Pilgrim, she had achieved that plateau. But even then, she continued to evolve and learn and grow even closer to whatever that connection she had.
And she wasn't formally religious, which is kind of
No,
interesting.
no. Mm,
Thank you.
you're welcome.
Well, I would say she was spiritual, but not religious.
Yes. Yeah.
Mary, we have another question in the chat box. Someone is asking, having grown up near the coast, did she miss the ocean much when she was far away from it?
I don't know. Honestly, it's a funny story that when she was into all this fashion, she got a bathing suit in the 20s that showed her legs, like almost
Ooh.
up to her thighs. And it was a huge, big deal. There are pictures of her in the water, swimming. And there's one of them with her sister, Helene. And she did. She loved to swim. She loved to do all that. But I can honestly say, and maybe others who have read the book can, join in, I can't remember ever reading anything about her missing parts of the country or missing something from, having changed her life. I know I'd miss the ocean, so. Anybody else?
Yes, this is Rebecca. And again, I want to thank you so much for this opportunity. I saw that it's being recorded. Is this going to be able to be accessed at another time?
Well, do you, Agnes, want to respond to that?
Okay, well, you will be giving it to the Peace Pilgrim website, is that correct?
Yeah, once you send me the link, Peace
Okay.
Pilgrim, we have a YouTube channel, and we can certainly create that link, add that link to it. But you said you were going to put it on the.
Yes, the Barnegat Quakers has a YouTube channel, and I don't know how well we're publicizing where our YouTube channel is, but if you go into YouTube and look for Barnegat Quakers, you'll find us. Excuse me. And we do plan to post it there. And I botched it up. I missed like the first half minute.
Right.
Beginner.
You know what? With technology as it is, we're all lucky that we're gathering in this circle virtually, because none of us are like our kids who know how to do it at the blink of an eye.
I'm loving this opportunity to get together virtually.
Speaking of our kids, is there, will this legacy continue beyond those who dedicated much of their time to this effort as time goes on?
Well, funny you should mention that. We, the board, I should say, has been thinking very seriously about its succession plan, meaning the need for people to carry this on. Many of the people of the board have been involved for decades and are either looking to go on to other things, or spending their time with other priorities, or not up to the task. It is quite time consuming to keep all these things going. So there will be opportunities for people who want to get involved with helping to carry it forward? And that's an excellent question. And it's one that I know they struggle with all the time. So if you know of anybody that might have an interest in getting involved, like all organizations, you're only as good as the number of volunteers that step forth, and hopefully the younger generation becomes involved. We've had quite a few young people at our celebrations, so maybe we can rope them in.
Seems like somebody ought to write a children's book.
Oh, yeah.
There's one that just came out. It's going to be published, I believe, March 1st. Bruce Nichols saw early copies of it, and the cover looks spectacular. It's an illustrated children's book. It's fabulous. My book that I wrote is a middle grade historical fiction. It's not a biography. It's I used real information and research and quotes and things like that, but I made up characters to make it more appealing to kids. And it's for 5th through 8th graders.
And the children's book is on Amazon. It's not available yet. So
you can order a pre-copy, but I think it's going to be March 1st, right?
Yeah, I don't know without looking. Yeah.
But it's a beautiful book.
Yeah.
I posted in the chat box our YouTube channel link so that anybody who wants to copy that link, you can check in the near future, and we will have this posted. And Mary, I'll let you know.
Okay, great.
So that you can also share it. And we have another question in the chat box. Have other people done peace walks inspired by peace pilgrims?
Yes, they have. No one has done peace pilgrimage. However, over the years, we've heard of many, many people. In fact, at our celebration, maybe 5 years ago, we had a gentleman who called himself Peace Artist. And he walked around the country rolling a baby carriage that had all his art supplies in it. And we'd do portraits of people as he met them, spreading the word of peace. And then there was Peace Walker, who is a professor of, I think, economics. I don't even know what he's a professor of, but he did
Planet Walker.
Planet Walker, sorry.
Mm-hmm.
For 17 years, he walked and remained silent, never said a word, but communicated very well. And from time to time, we hear of a lot of people who do walks. Paula Francis is another one. She has recently completed a huge circuit over the last few years. And I know our board members have connected with her and hosted her. And hers is also in the name of peace. So there's many people who say they were inspired by Peace Pilgrim and have done their own things. We don't really keep track of everyone, but there's a lot of people out there.
Can someone put the names of the children's books in the chat box to everyone? I'm being asked if we can give the book titles.
Barbara, are you checking that on
I'll try.
Okay, all right, thanks. You know, it's just incredible to think of somebody doing that pilgrimage. It's, to me, so not something that an American would do.
Yeah. I think you have to be called to it.
Oh, yes.
I mean, she slept in some incredible places. She wrote about sleeping in fire engines, sleeping on cement floors. She once got locked in a gas station bathroom for 22 hours because they had gone home and they were closed on Sunday.
Oh, yeah.
She couldn't get out. And then she spoke about like laying down in the middle of a wheat field and waking up with a huge reaper bearing down on her. And she jumped up and scared the guy half to death. So, you know, she also talked about sleeping on haystacks and looking at the sky. And that was one of her favorites. And she slept by stream beds and, you know, and people always wondered if she got enough to eat. And her answer to that was she did a 45-day fast once.
Wow.
And after that, she met so many people who invited her in to have food and stay in their houses that she used to say that she had to turn them down. Probably that's why she turned down the peanut butter and jelly sandwich. She was getting too much food, that she just had too much to eat. Yeah.
I have a couple more questions here. Is there anyone else who gives presentations about Peace Pilgrim is the one question.
I think other members of the board do, right, Barbara? I don't know. I know Bruce has.
And
And
Bruce has. And I guess for those who may not know, let's see, we usually have an annual celebration of Peace Pilgrim's life at the park in Egg Harbor City. So last year we didn't, but there's tentative plans of doing it sometime this summer and maybe honoring Peace Pilgrim and her sister Helene, who just passed. And I also just came up with this idea. So just maybe I thought it'd be great to have a bike ride, an organized bike ride in memory of Helene.
that would be really nice.
Yeah, yeah. So, I
Because Helene, for those of you who don't know, rode her bike until she was 100 years old and was in a bike ride, a formal bike ride for Stockton at that time.
yeah, so I think I think the stars could possibly align for that. So this summer or whenever the stars align.
Okay, so I guess that would be at peacepilgrim.org where
Yes.
people could find out about that.
Yes, we actually put the news of all our celebrations on our
Okay.
Facebook page and on the website and in the newsletter. We try to get the word out in lots of different ways. There's also usually an annual retreat. It's a weekend in the woods in a cabin that, of course, because of COVID was canceled this year, but that hopefully will take place in October next year.
Yeah, we do have it booked.
A date, right?
That'll be in the newsletter. And I found out the name of the book, the children's book.
Okay. Do you want to put them in the chat box?
I typed it in the chat box, but I think it just went to you.
I didn't see it come across. Oh, wait, I see it. It's down below the bottom. Okay. I had another question, and I'll put this message to everyone more about food. What did Peace Pilgrim eat to power all those steps, and was she vegetarian or vegan?
Yeah, I actually should have mentioned that one of her relinquishments was meat, because she realized that she never wanted to ask anybody to do anything she wouldn't do herself, and she would never kill a pig or kill a cow or anything. So she became a vegetarian right at the very beginning of her 15-year transition, and never ate meat after that. While she was walking, she subsided on berries and herbs, and she was really good with like a little packet of oatmeal or dried milk. Those were the things that sustained her on the Appalachian Trail. And like I said, more times than not, she was invited to people's houses and they always cooked huge meals for her. A lot of times she would say no and then go sleep in the woods because she preferred that sometimes. But she always felt like she had enough to eat. She said she never went for more than 2 days without food. And when she did, it didn't worry her. And the other thing people always, have sometimes asked is about her health or going to doctors or getting checkups or anything. And in those 28 years of wandering, she went to the dentist once, and that was it. She was extremely healthy. She writes about how healthy she is. And
I remember she used to carry around a card with the recipe for Peace Pilgrim's nut loaf.
Right, the nut loaf.
So we do have the recipe, but one very funny story is that one of the retreats, we tried to make a vegan version of the nut loaf. So it was like, so anyhow, you had to be a diehard vegan to
eat it,
to enjoy it. There were a few, but yeah.
Well, she wasn't a vegan, she was a vegetarian.
Right.
Yeah.
I can tell you, I'm pretty adventurous about what I'll eat. And we had a vegetarian friend in Britain who fed us his nut loaf once for dinner.
I was like, no way.
I couldn't swallow it. I'm looking around for a napkin.
Yeah.
No, but you know what? I think she would be vegan if she was here nowadays with what's happened in the food.
Probably with what's happened with industrial farming and everything else,
I think
and
she would.
pesticides and, right.
Mhm.
I agree.
Yeah.
So, anybody else, or are we?
I saw somebody's microphone light up, but I didn't hear anything.
Promise, one last question. Mary, what is your children's book's name?
Mine is called Peace Pilgrim, Walking Her Talk Against Hate.
Thank you.
And don't forget, there's also the free books from the Peace Pilgrim organization that the books in her own words, collections of Peace Pilgrim's words and her travels, and then the steps towards inner peace. And I highly recommend the documentary. It's a fun hour watch. You'll just, really get a sense of who she was.
Thank you.
You know, I thought at the beginning that I said that everybody could post to everyone, and I just checked the settings and I see that I must not have done that properly.
Yeah, because I haven't seen a thing. I've been checking to see if anybody had.
So now I've changed the setting, and we're still getting a few comments. So anybody who would like to comment to all of us now, you should be able to do that.
I was going to add about people can sign up to get the newsletter.
Yes, on our website. They can get the free newsletter on our website.
And yeah, you can have it mailed or
emailed, either one.
Mailed or emailed.
Okay, so that's here, right?
Peace Pilgrim, yes. Peace Pilgrim.
Okay. Somebody shared before I opened up the chat box that, wait, it scrolled, that he heard that the Jewish New Year for trees just ended yesterday.
Tu B'Shavat.
Okay.
Tu B'Shavat. Yes.
Okay. Celebrating our relationship to trees. Yes. And he thought that sort of consciousness is something Peace Pilgrim might have appreciated.
Absolutely.
Okay, the messages are still only coming to me, I think. And I have another question of, is there a curriculum for young people that Peace Pilgrim's like?
Not per se, not anything that would meet the core standards. I personally, and I know Barbara has, we've gone around to schools, and every once in a while it fits into the teaching tolerance curriculum.
Okay.
There's no standalone module or anything that a teacher could pick up and use it.
Yeah, I saw a college has some courses on peace studies. I don't know. I probably sent it to you, Mary. I think it's Nassau College in New York. And I don't know that I could quickly go to their website and get their link. But they had a lot of good resources.
Yeah. There's a lot out there, and despite the appearance in the media and everywhere else, I think there, I think Peace Pilgrim would agree that we are further along and closer to peace, even though it may not look like it on the surface. There's also a lot of good things happening, and it may not get, the conflicted media attention, but there are many circles of people who are working very hard towards peace. And as I said before, I think the major challenge is many people work towards peace and they don't have inner peace. And that was the thing I come back to every time I think, write, or listen to things that Peace Pilgrim has said.
Okay. Yeah, I put the link there. Nassau Community College.
Okay.
And the link is a little higher up if everybody can see that link. They have several courses on peace studies. It looked interesting.
Yeah, wonderful.
Okay, now I see that it is working and some of the attendees are able to send messages to everyone.
Well, thank you. It was my pleasure to be a part of this tonight. So I appreciate your taking your time and listening. Especially all of you probably know as much or more than I do about Peace Pilgrim. So makes it even more rewarding.
No, not at all. And please, if anybody doesn't know how to save the chat, please speak up and learn, because there's a lot that's good in the chat, all those links,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know how to do that.
I don't know exactly how to do that. I know you can select what's there and copy it and paste it into some other software.
There should be three, when you go to the bottom of the chat and there's three little buttons, three little dot.
I see them.
If you click at the top, it says save chat.
That's right. Yes, I see it. Perfect.
Okay. I guess I'm not seeing that. Where is that? Meeting settings or?
No. Do you have your chat open? Do you have a white box next to where everybody's faces is and it says chat on top?
Open the chat. Okay, I see the chat. I see that.
Okay, so click on the chat to open that.
Okay.
And then all the way at the bottom, you should see where it says 2 Barnegat Quakers, and then there's 3 little dots.
Okay, I see where it says send to Barnegat Quakers.
Right, so keep moving your eyes to the right and you'll see in a little rounded square, there's 3 dots.
I'm on a phone, and so maybe it's different.
Yeah, it might be different.
Yeah. I don't know. I guess I must be on a different thing. I mean,
that could be.
Yeah.
Lisa, if you gave your email address, you registered, right? I think
Right. Yeah, I'm registered.
I'll send it to you.
Oh, well, thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Oh, you're welcome. Okay. 74 lines of chats. Do you? Okay. All right. I know, Mary, you've been very generous with your time and been willing to stay as long as we have questions.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
And I'm wondering if anybody has any more. Should we wrap up? Should we continue? I guess you can be contacted through your website, right? If anybody has any questions later.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. And I have your earthwaysart.com. Is that?
Well, the best way to reach me is through my email, and I think you have that, Agnes. So if you can share that with anybody.
Okay.
Mary, are you interested in doing this slideshow repeat performances, or should people just look for it on the website link, or what's your preference?
I'm happy to do it for groups. I mean, I find that as we, widen those ripples, you throw the pebble in and the ripples widen, and you just never know what difference it will make. So the more we can throw those pebbles in, it has to, land land in a good way, I should say. So if I'm available, I'm happy to do it. Right now, I'm pretty homebound, so I think like everybody is with COVID.
Thank you.
And I'm also happy to send anybody the slides. If you'd like to just have this, the PowerPoint presentation, I can send that as well.
Okay, I put your email address there. I hope it's visible to everybody. So anybody who would like to ask you for a copy of your presentation can write to you directly.
Okay, that's fine.
All right, shall we wrap up?
Well, that sounds good. Thank you. And
Thank you.
thank you all for
Thank you.
Thank you.
joining this. It's a great way to kick off the weekend. Be kind to yourselves and others.
Thank you.
Find that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
I really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mary.
All righty. Good night, all.
Bye.
Good night, everyone.
Good night. Peace.